Hello student armies, welcome back to Diksha Vedantu channel. This is your master teacher Navya and today we will be starting with the first chapter, the very first chapter in your geography class 10, right? So today we will be starting with the chapter resources and development. Okay, so hi Venu, hi. Good morning, good afternoon everyone, good afternoon. So yeah, today we'll be starting with geography and I'll also be teaching economics and biology for you all. Right? And along with that, see, if you have not yet joined our Telegram channel, then do join. The link for the Telegram channel is in the description. Right? So by joining Telegram channel, what are all the advantages that you're gonna get? Is that, see, every day we'll be uploading the daily sessions, PDF will be uploaded over there. Okay, anyway, we are also providing the link of those notes in the description also. Okay, and along with that, weekly mock test will be provided, and also we are conducting weekly interactive session as well, and also daily practice questions. Everything will be provided in our Telegram channel, right? We'll also be providing assignments and all that, so you can practice from there. You will get every updates that is related to our channel. Everything will be posted in Telegram channel. So if you have not yet joined the Telegram channel, do join our Telegram channel, Diksha Vedantu 9th and 10th, and the Telegram channel link is in the description. And along with that, you can also see that we have provided the link for you all to download previous year questions as well. The link for downloading those question papers also is in the description, right? Okay, clear with that? So yeah, before starting today's session, once I would like to confirm that, am I audible, students? Am I audible? Can you all hear me? Let me check once. Okay, clear with that? Yes. So yeah, the live has started. And like you all know, I have already told that today we'll be starting with the chapter resources and development. Right. So what are we gonna study? What are we gonna study in this particular session? See, first we'll see water resources, right? And then we'll be studying about the classification of resources, that how the resources are classified and all that. And then we'll be studying about the development of resources, wherein we'll focus more on, we will study about sustainable development. What is this sustainable development all about? Why is it important? We will see that, right? And then we'll also be covering land resources and soil resources in this particular chapter. Okay, and in today's session, I'll be starting with water resources, right? And how are resources classified, what are all its classification, and then we'll be focusing on the development of resources. We'll be focusing on the development of resources. Like I told you, we'll speak about sustainable resources over there, and then we'll be focusing on resource planning and how is resource planning done in India. So in today's session, we are gonna cover these topics. In the next session, I will be covering land and soil resources, right? Clear with that? Clear with that? Okay, so are you all ready for the session? Shall we get started with today's session? So first, before getting into the types of resources, I'll give a brief introduction about water resources, which are all the substances that we consider them as resources. For a substances to be a resource, what are all the criteria? We will see that. Okay, students, clear with that? Yeah. So now, what is a resource, or what are resources? So resources are something which is present in our environment, a substance which is present in our environment, and we use that substance. Why? For our own benefit. So the substance which is present in our environment and we are using that for our own benefit, they are considered as resources. Okay, but then can can we say that each and every substance that is present around us, can we consider them as a resource? What do you think? Can we consider them as resource? Answer is no, right? So, for a substance to be a resource, it will have to fulfill 3 criteria. It will have to fulfill 3 criteria, right? What are those 3 criteria? Criteria number 1 is it has to be technologically accessible, right? Criteria number 2 is it has to be economically feasible, and criteria number 3 is culturally it has to be acceptable. Alright. So now let's understand these 3 criteria with an example. Okay. So now I told you that we consider a substance as a resources. If what is resource? Everything that is available in our environment and we are using it for our own benefit. That is resource, and it will have to fulfill these 3 criteria, right? Okay. So now let's understand about these 3 criteria with an example. Clear? Let's say that there is a school. There is a school, and below the school, okay, let's say in the ground level, as you go deep down, let's say below a school there is, let me draw a rough diagram for this. Okay. So now let's say that this is a school. This building, it is a school, right? It's a school, right? And now let's say that below there are so many, they got to know that there are lots of coal that is present. These are coal. Let's say these are coal. Okay. We know that coal is an excellent source of fuel, right? Coal is an excellent source of fuel, right? So now the government has found out that below the school, like in the the region that is present below the school, in that ground level, there is good amount of coal. So we can do coal mining. Like that the government will find out. Okay. So now this is a resource. If we use that, it will be beneficial for us, right? Now to remove these coal out, what do we require? We require certain equipments and all that. So we require certain technologies in order to dig the ground and get that coal out, right? So therefore, whenever there is some resource that is present in our environment, for that resource to be utilized, there must be sufficient technology available to get that resources. That's what technologically accessible means. Okay, we require technology for that. And what was the second criteria? Second criteria was economically it has to be feasible. What is meant by economically feasible? Now I told you that to remove this coal out of the ground, I told you we will require certain equipment, we require technologies, right? Do we get the technology for free? Do we get those equipment for free? No, right? We will have to invest on them. We will have to invest on those, equipments, and along with this, we even require certain people, right? We want employees to work over there, and then we will have to pay those employees also, right? So now economically feasible is nothing but the amount of output should be more than input, or else the net output, economically feasible was the second criteria, right? That was the second criteria, which means to say that, net output should be more. It should be more than net input. Which means to say that, now I told for equipments, for paying those employees, we are investing some money, right? So that is our input, right? And whatever profit that we are gonna get from this coal mining, that should be more. So always your output should be more than input. only then it is considered as economically feasible. Only then it will be profitable for us also. What if we invest more but if we get less? Do you think it is, acceptable? No, right? It will simply cause loss for us. Therefore, always whenever there is some resource and if you are gonna utilize that resource for our own benefit, then before utilizing it for our benefit, first we should check if it is economically feasible. Okay? If it is economically feasible, only then we can proceed further. Right? And then the third criteria was cultural acceptance. Right? Now, what is meant by cultural acceptance? Now, I told you that over here there is a school. So, now in order to, for coal mining to take place, we will have to remove this building, the school. For that, do you think the people will accept? The people in that locality, in that community, their acceptance should be there. Along with that, here the students' acceptance, the school, whoever is heading that school, they must agree with that. Only after that, the mining is possible, right? So, whenever we get to know that, okay, there is a resource from which we can, which can be used for our own benefit. When we find out that there is some substance which is present in our environment and we can utilize that for our own benefit, right? So, whenever you recognize that, the three criteria that you will have to check upon is, the first one is technology accessible, technically it has to be accessible, and the second one is it must be economically feasible, and then it has to be accepted by the people in that locality. Only then that substance will be considered as resources. Clear with that, students? You understood, right, what is resources and when is that substance considered as resource? Clear with that, right? These three criteria has to be fulfilled. That is technologically accessible, economically feasible and culturally acceptable. Okay? Clear with that? So, now you understood the three criteria, right? And so, in this resource, human is an important component of resources. Human is the important component of resources. Human is the important component of resources. Why do you think so that human is important component of resource? It's because, see, the human being, I told you that, okay, let's say that there is a river. There is a river, right? So, we can utilize that river and from that we can get electricity. How? For that, first we will have to construct dam, right? Now, who is constructing dam? It is we human being, right? And from where are we getting those technology, those equipments and all that? It is we human being, right? We, there are engineers who will construct those equipments, those technologies and all that. Who is doing that? It is human being. So, only with the help of human being, we can use those natural resources for our own benefit. That's why human being is the important component of resources. Right? So, now you understood what is resources and why human being is the important component of resources. Clear with that, right? So, always the process of transformation of something that is available in our environment, it involves an interdependent relation. An interdependent relation which is nothing but that is the relationship between the human being with the physical environment, nothing but the nature, with the institution and also technology. There is interaction between human being, nature, institution as well as technology. Okay. So, this is a brief introduction for what is resources and when will you call particular substance as a resource. It will have to fulfill these three criteria. And why is human being considered as the important component of resource? It's because he is the one who will construct those, dams and the equipments, the technology that is required and all that. Okay, and the human, he interacts with the nature, institution as well as technology. Okay, clear with that, students? Fine. So, that was, like I told you, a brief introduction to what are resources and what is its importance. Right, we are going to utilize them for our own benefit. We will see that how are we utilizing those resources and all that. Now, let's see the second one, that is the classification of resources. So the resources, they are classified into 3 types. See, it can be natural, human and human made. Okay. So further the natural one, we will be focusing on the natural one, right, which is further classified based on the origin. That is the resource. I told you, no, there are, see, the resources, it can be naturally occurring, right, it can be naturally occurring also, and it can be man-made also. What we are going to focus is, we are going to focus on the naturally occurring resources, right. Again, this is further classified into 5 types. The first one is based on origin, that is from where are we getting that resources, okay, from where are we getting the origin, and then that is the first classification. Second will be focusing on based on the utility, that is whether utility, and also you can say exhaustibility, wherein we will see that whether that resource, whether it can be reproduced or not, whether it is renewable or non-renewable, we will study that. And the third classification is, it is based on the level of development. It is based on level of development, wherein we will study about potential resource, actual resource, and then the fourth one is based on the distribution, that is where it is located and all that, whether it is localized or ubiquitous, or we will see that whether it is localized or ubiquitous. And then the fifth one is based on ownership, that is who owns that resource. Based on that, it is classified into individual, national, community and international, right. We will be focusing on all these topics now, right. So now we will be moving on to the classification of resources. I told you how it is classified. We will study about each one with example. Okay, clear with that? So now I want you all to answer. See, the resources can be classified on the basis of origin as, is it biotic and abiotic or renewable and non-renewable? I told you that, see, there were 5 types of classification. One was based on origin and the other one was based on exhaustibility, based on ownership, based on where it is located and all that. So now, based on origin, the resources are classified into 2 types, right. Is it option A, which says biotic and abiotic, and option B says renewable and non-renewable? Which one do you think is the right answer? Okay. So, Vemu says biotic and abiotic. Yes, it is biotic and abiotic. Okay. So now we will be starting with the first one, which is based on origin, right. So the resource, whether it is from, biotic is nothing but something that is living, and abiotic means non-living, we know that, right. So here it is very simple. The resource that is obtained from living organism, that is considered as biotic resources. On the other hand, the resources that is obtained from non-living, they are considered as abiotic resources. Okay. Now the example is, see, the human beings, flora, fauna, fisheries, livestock, all these fall under biotic resources, right. Whereas abiotic resources are rocks and metals, right. Now I have a question for you all. So whether the coal, do you consider coal as biotic resource or abiotic resource? Coal, I am talking about coal. Let me write it down. Which one do you consider this coal as biotic or abiotic? From where do we get coal? How are we getting coal? How are we getting petroleum and all that? See, coal, see, this type of question might be asked, whether coal, whether it is biotic resource or abiotic resource. See, the answer is, the coal is a biotic resource. Why? Because how are we getting coal? See, for the formation of coal, it takes billions of years. And how is it being formed? It is formed by dead plants and animals, right? Nothing but they were living. They are organic matters, right? They are from biotic components. So the coal is formed from the dead plants and animal, but it takes billion of years. But the origin is from the living organism only. After it dies, they will develop, what, they will get degraded, and it take billions of years for the formation of coal. So always remember students, coal, it is a biotic resource. Okay, clear with that? Fine. And the second one is based on exhaustibility. Now based on exhaustibility, there are two types. One is renewable resource and the other one is non-renewable resource. So renewable resource are those resources which can be produced again and again. So you use them and again it can be produced. How can you produce those resources? Either through physical, chemical or mechanical process, again it can be produced. Such resources are considered as renewable resources, right? On the other hand, the second one is non-renewable resources. So here these are the resources which cannot be produced again and again. That's why it is non-renewable. Now I gave you example of coal, right? And I told you that coal, it takes billions of years for its formation, right? So now there is a coal, and if we finish off that petroleum, coal, everything, then the next generation will not have coal and petroleum, right? They will have to wait for billions of years for its formation. So that is also an example of non-renewable resources, right? So renewable resources are those resources which can be reproduced again. How? By physical, chemical and mechanical process. Example is solar and wind energy, water, forest, wildlife, all these are renewable resources. Whereas non-renewable resources are fossil fuels which cannot be recycled. It gets exhausted with their use. It gets exhausted and it takes billions of years for its formation. Okay, so these are the two types of resources on the basis of exhaustibility, So the first one which we saw was based on origin. Second one is based on exhaustibility, right? So now the third one is based on ownership. So based on ownership, again it is classified into four types. One is the individual resource, community resource, national resource and international resource, right? So individual resource are those resources which are owned by one person, right? Now for example, let's say there is a garden, right? That garden belongs to the person who is staying in that house, right? So that is example for individual, resource. What about community resource? The community resource is owned by one particular community. For example, picnic spot is example for community resource. And what about national resource? National resources are those resources which is owned by either state government. It is owned by state government or central government. Like it can be roadways, railways and all that. That is national resource. And what about international resource? International resource, that is owned by, it is over there we will be talking about, in case of national resources, we will be speaking about those resources which is falling within the boundary of the country. Whereas international resources, we will be talking about those resources which falls outside the boundary of the country, beyond the boundary. Okay, so these are the four types of resources under what? Basis of ownership. Okay, in that we will see a bit in depth with example. Like I told you, the first one is individual, which is, it is owned privately by a particular person. Example, it can be land that is allotted to farmer by the government, right? And then it can be, like I told you, garden also, right? Whereas when it comes to community, it is owned by one or two communities, particular community, right? For example, it can be, grazing grounds, burial grounds, or village ponds, public parks and all that, picnic spots, like I told you, playground, that will be owned by one particular community. Okay. And then the next one is, we'll see national and international as well. Before that, now I want you all to tell water is which type of resource. Water is which type of resource? Is it renewable or non-renewable? Come on students, comment in the comment section. Water is which type of resource? Is it renewable or non-renewable? See, already till now we have covered the classification of resource on the basis of origin, on the basis of exhaustibility, and then we have started with on the basis of ownership, wherein there are 4 types. Till now we have covered 2 types. The other 2 we will see. Before that, I want you all to answer that whether water is which type of resource? Is it renewable or non-renewable? Come on, I want you all to say. Is it renewable or non-renewable? It is renewable. Right, it is renewable. Okay. So yeah, now we will see the third type, that is national resource. The third type of resource which falls under the ownership. Okay. So here the national resource, like I told you here, the resource it is owned by the government. It can be state government or central government. Okay, it belongs to nation, nothing but those things which falls within the boundary of the country. Okay, see the country has legal power to acquire even private properties also for public good. Okay, it can even take the private property for the benefit of the public itself, and all the mineral, water resources, forest, wildlife, land within the political boundary, that is, and even the oceanic area up to 12 nautical miles. 12 nautical miles that from the coastal is also termed as terrestrial water, and the resources therein belong to the nation. What does that mean? What does this point mean? Let me explain you that with the help of this diagram. But then here you got right that what is natural resources? Natural resources are those resources which are owned by the government. It can be state government, it can be central government. Example is all mineral, water resource, forest, wildlife, and all that which falls within a nation, that is controlled by the government. And even the government has the power to take the private property also for the welfare of the people. Okay, now let's try to understand what is this nautical miles, what is this nautical, we'll see that. See, I told you, see this is, our India map, and this is your Indian Ocean, right, there is Indian Ocean. Now, look at this, from this coastal area till 200 nauticals, 200 nauticals or 12 nautical miles. That region is, it is considered as India's resource. See, again within sea, over there within the water bodies, there are so many other resources which can be used, right. So, here the distance, just like how you measure the land, how you measure the highway, the distance with the help of kilometer, meters, like that. Similarly, you can measure the water body with the help of nautical. You will have to mention nautical, right. So, the 200 nauticals away from the coastal region, this region is considered as, national resource. Within the water body, there are so many, marine animals, there will be certain resources and all that, right. And also that is considered as India's, that is not open sea. Whereas, beyond this region, that is after the 200 nautical, the other region that is there, that is considered as open sea. That is considered as open sea. Clear with that? So, it has to be 200 nautical or else 12 nautical miles. Okay, clear with that? Fine. And then the fourth one is international resources. The fourth one is international resources. So, here the international resources, those resources which is owned by other countries, like which is, we are talking about the resources that is present outside the nation's boundary. Okay, like for example, the best example is ocean itself. Now, I told you, see here is our India, right, and let's say that this region is 200 nauticals away from the India, away from the coastal line, right. So, that 200 nauticals, it belongs to us, that is our exclusive economic zone. It is exclusive economic zone, that is like you see. The rest, the other part that is open sea, which is controlled by other country, which is owned by other countries. Okay. So now the international resources, what happens is that the best example for international resources, it can be flights, right, sea navigation also, and flight and all that is international resource, right. So these are the international institution which regulates some resources. Like I told you, the oceanic region that is beyond 200 nautical miles of the EEZ, that is exclusive economic zone. Like I told you, I have mentioned over here, let's consider that roughly that this is the 200 nautical distance. Beyond this it is international resource. It belongs to the open, it is considered as open sea or open ocean, okay, wherein no individual country utilizes these without the concurrence of the international institution. Okay, clear with that? So now you understand, till now we covered, see we are doing classification of resources, in that the first one was based on origin. There was two types, one was biotic resource and the other one was abiotic resource, and the second one was based on the exhaustibility, wherein we studied about renewable and non-renewable resources, and the third one was based on the ownership, wherein we saw that which type of resources are owned by particular, like we saw who owns that resource and all that. See, under the resources which was classified based on ownership, there are four types. One is individual resource, and then community resource, the third one was national, and the fourth one was international. You understood the difference between national resource and international resources, right? Clear with that, no? National and international resources, right? So yeah, and then our fourth classification is based on the status of development. The status of development, wherein we will see that till what extent that particular resource has been developed, or if the resource is developed, is there good quality technology with us to utilize that resource. We will see about all that under this classification, right. So on the basis of status of development, again there are four types of resources. The first one is potential resource, and the second one is developed resource, the third one is stock resource, and the fourth one is reserved resource. Okay. So now what is meant by potential resource? Potential resources are those resources which are present in abundance. They are present in abundance, but then we don't have sufficient technology to utilize that resource. That's why it is considered as potential resources, right. Now for example, you know that Rajasthan over there, in certain places, majority of the places in Rajasthan, there is the wind pressure is very high, right, but then they have very few windmills. They can actually construct some more windmills, but then unfortunately they have very few, because of which most of the wind energy is which it is not utilized. It is not utilized properly. Even solar energy, over there they can utilize solar energy, but then they are not utilizing it properly. So in those regions, what happens, the resources in abundance, but then we don't have sufficient technology to utilize them. They fall under potential resources. Okay. See over here, the wind energy in Gujarat, and also solar energy in Rajasthan, and also wind energy in Rajasthan also, right. But so far these have not been developed properly. Till now it has not been developed properly. Okay. And the second one is developed resource. So in case of developed resource, see, the resource is present in abundance, the sufficient amount of resources there, and we have technology also, and we are utilizing that resources. So that is developed resource. But the thing is, See, however, the development of the resources in different localities, it depends upon the quality of technology. It depends upon the quality of technology, so it varies. But then they fall under developed resources. Okay. The example is, see, I told you the technology and the level of their feasibility. Okay, here what happens in developed resources, nothing but the resources are present in sufficient amount and we have technology also to utilize them. They are developed resource, but then the development of the resource, it differs from one place to another place based on the quality of technology. Okay, clear with that? And the third one is stock. So now, what do you mean by stock? What is meant by stock? So stock is something, generally when I say stock, what does that mean? It means to say that there is something in excess, it has been stored, right? So now stock resources are nothing but, see, the material in the environment which have potential to satisfy human needs, but then human beings don't have appropriate technology. They don't have knowledge, they don't have much knowledge of that particular technology which can be used to obtain that particular resource. That falls under stock resource. That falls under stock resource. So, sufficient amount of resources are there, but we human beings don't know how to utilize those resources because we don't have sufficient amount of technology, we don't have appropriate technology to get those resources, to make use of those resources. Such resources fall under stock resources. Okay, and then the fourth one is reserve resources. So reserve resources are those resources, see, actually they are present in sufficient amount. Okay, and we have the knowledge also, we have the knowledge about that, we also have the technologies to obtain that resources, but then we are not exploring those regions where such resources are present. The question is, why are we not exploring those resources? Why are we not exploring? It's because we are reserving that resources for the future generation. See, in case now if we utilize all the resources that is there, okay, if we identify them, if we explore them, and with the help of our knowledge, like the knowledge that we have pertaining to that resource, and if we build particular technology for that, and what if we use that entire resource, then what will we preserve for the future generation? Some amount of substance has to be there, right? Resources has to be reserved for the future generation also, right? So such resources fall under reserves. Okay, so this was all about the resources which was classified on the basis of status of development. Status of development. Okay, clear with that? So on the basis of status of development, there are 4 types: potential resource, developed resource, stock and reserves. You got an idea, right, that what is potential, what is developed, stock and reserve. See, the difference between stock and reserve is very simple. Stock, what happens, it is present in sufficient amount, but then we don't have the technological knowledge to obtain that resource. Whereas in case of reserve, we have sufficient amount of resource, we also have the technological knowledge, but then we are not exploring those resources. Why? Because we are preserving them for the future generation. That is reserve. Okay, clear with that? So till now, see, we started with what are resources, what is resources, when will you consider that particular substance as resources. We saw that that particular substance will have to fulfill 3 criteria. What are all those 3 criteria? The criteria number 1 was, what was it? It was technologically accessible. The second one is economically feasible. The third one is culturally it has to be acceptable, right? And then we even saw that the human being is the important component of resources, right? And then we started with the classification of resources, wherein we studied about the classification of resources which is based on origin. Based on origin, it was 2 types, that is biotic and abiotic, and based on exhaustibility, it was 2 types, that is renewable and non-renewable, and based on ownership, there was 4 types, that is individual, community, national and international, and then based on the status of development, again it is of 4 types, that is potential, developed resource, stock and reserves. Okay, clear with that? this is important for your exam. These classification, these 4 types of classification are very, very important for your exam. Okay, clear with that? So now I want you all to answer to these questions. Okay, this can be like your homework question also. Once we are done with this session, you people can type the answer for this question in the comment section and I will get back to you. So the question number 1 is, what is the difference between renewable and non-renewable resources? It is easy, right? And then the question number 2 is, what is exclusive economic zone? What is exclusive economic zone? I want you all to answer to this question. Okay, once the session is done, I want you all to type the answer for this question in the comment section, right? So now we have completed, I told you, we started with introduction part wherein we studied what are resources and we studied classification of resources, right? So now I have quiz for you all and I want you all to answer to this question. Okay, so now what are the main factors that determines the creation of a resource? Option A says technology, nature and technology. Option B says nature and human being. Option C says nature, human being and technology. And option D says technology and human being. So which one is the right answer? I want you all to comment in the comment section. Which one do you think is the right answer? Main factor for the creation of resource, factors. I am not talking about criteria, I am talking about the factors. Any guesses, students? Think. See, in your board exams you have, in your section A you will get MCQ question. So 40% of your question paper is MCQ question, right? So you can score marks easily. Come on, I want you all to comment in the comment section. Which one do you think is the right answer, students? Okay, I'll count. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let me answer. It is option C. It is option C. So now if you want to, create some resource, see, we want that substance and that substance should fulfill those 3 criteria. Okay, fine. We are getting that substance from the nature only, and we human beings, what are we doing? With the help of technology, we are converting that particular substance into something which can be utilized for our own benefit, right? So option C is the right answer. Clear? So second question is, see, the fossil fuels are example of which of the following type of resources? Option A says renewable, option B says non-renewable, option C says biological and option D says non-conventional. Which one do you think is the right answer? See, it is, do you think the fossil fuel can be renewable? No, it takes billions of years for it to be produced again, so it is not renewable. Instead, it is option B. Option B is the right answer. Okay, clear with that? So next question, which of the following is community owned resource? So I have given you example for community owned resource, right? So we saw classification of resource in which the resource which was classified on the basis of ownership, there were 4 types. One was individual, the second one was ownership, the second one was community, third one was national and the fourth was international, right? So now they are asking about community owned resource. So option A says picnic spot, option B says burial grounds, option C says playground, option D says all of the above. So which one is the right answer? Which one is the right answer? Any guesses? It is option D. See, picnic spot, playground, even burial ground, all these, it is owned by particular community. So it is community owned resource, right? So the next question, which of the following can be considered as individual resource? Which one is individual resource? House, forest, playground or pond? Obviously it is house, right? Option A is the right answer. Okay, so now I want you all to classify the resource on the basis of their origin. On the basis of their origin, there were two types, right? One was biotic and the other one was abiotic, right? So from this section, that is the classification of resource, you will get questions like this. You saw MCQ question, how it can be asked, and then also if they ask for 2 mark, 3 mark, they will ask questions like this. Classify resource on the basis of their origin, or classify on the basis of their, it can be ownership or exhaustibility or on the status of development. They might ask questions like this. So for example, have given this question, that is on the basis of their origin, how can you classify them? One is the biotic resource and the other one is abiotic resource. So biotic resources are those resources which are obtained from living organism, and abiotic are those resources which are obtained from non-living organism. Right? Example is human being, flora, fauna, fisheries, livestock and all that. Whereas abiotic resources are, best example is rock and metals. Okay, clear with that, students? Clear with that? Okay, fine. So we have completed the classification of resources. We understood what is resource and what are the classification of resource, right? So now we'll move on to the development of resource. Okay, so now what do we mean by development of resource? See, we all know, right, that development is very important. We'll have to develop our country, right, for which we will have to utilize resources, right? But then see, we are getting resources are there in our environment. So it's because it is available. Do you think if you just randomly, if you use those resources for developing a country, don't you think that resources will get exhausted? Don't you think that, there will be no resources in case, if you just randomly, without planning, if we utilize those resources for development, do you think it is sustainable? Do you think it is sustainable? So now we'll speak about we'll talk about what is sustainable development and why is planning important. Why is resource planning important? How resource planning is done in India? We will study that. Okay. So yeah, what are all the resources that we are actually using? See, we have solar energy, water energy, forest resource, coal, soil, oil, wind energy, animal resources and all that. So when you are using these resources, we should be very careful, right? See, development is important, but not at the cost of environment. Okay. So yeah, now what happens? See, if you use those resources like randomly, without, if you over exploitation of resources, it leads to, one is depletion. The resource will get depleted. Okay, fine. And then it will lead to division. It will lead to division like rich and poor. How? See, now let's say that now we get drinking water for free and all that, right? But after some time, now let's say there is no water. Even if you want to get water, you will have to pay huge amount. Only then if you get water, then what happens? Only rich can afford to buy that water, whereas poor cannot. So there will be division, right? So there will be division, right? And along with that, global warming. Why global warming? See what happens over there. The temperature increases in the atmosphere, right, due to the excess release of carbon dioxide. How is that carbon dioxide released? By burning the fossil fuels and all that, the carbon dioxide is released, and the carbon dioxide has got the capacity to capture the heat, because of which the temperature increases, right? And that time what happens, if there is no proper, if you continuously deforest the region for developing industries, then it will lead to global warming, right? And also ozone layer depletion because of, excessive use. What happens when there is so much of CFC released into the atmosphere? Then what happens? There will be ozone layer depletion, right? And then also the pollution, where if you use too much of pesticides, fertilizers and all that, what happens? It will cause soil pollution and all that. and also land degradation, right? So therefore, when you are making use of resources, we should be very careful. We should plan accordingly and then make use of those resources. Okay, clear? So therefore, what was I telling? The resource planning is very essential. Very essential. Why? For sustainable existence. For sustainable existence of all the life form on earth, right? So that's where, now what happens is that, see, if what I told, if you use too much of resources for the development, okay, for the shorter period of time, yes, you will see good outcome, but after some times what happens? The resource gets depleted and it will lead to our own degradation, right? And such type of development is not called as sustainable development. So when will you say that the development is sustainable? If the sustainable is done but not at the cost of environment. Okay, it should not be at the cost of environment. Okay, clear with that? And somewhere in 1922, some 100 leaders, the 100 leaders from different countries, they attended the International Earth Summit. Okay, where did that take place? It took place in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Okay, so wherein they discussed certain issues that is related to the environmental protection and socio-economic development at the global level, right? And then the assembly, they came up with a decision where they signed a declaration. They signed a declaration on global climatic changes and also biological diversity, right? And then this Rio Convention endorsed the global forest principle. It endorsed the global forest principle and also it adopted the Agenda 21. See, the Agenda 21 is very important. We'll talk about Agenda 21 as we go further. Okay, so this was the first step. This was the first step that was taken, wherein they recognized that yes, resources has to be used properly, wherein they spoke about sustainable development and all that. Okay, they considered that as an issue, that is environmental degradation. They recognized that for the first time in 1922. And also they focused on, fighting against the diseases and also to prevent the poverty and all that. Okay, and then they signed Agenda 21 as well. We will see what is this Agenda 21 as we go further. Right? So now, can you name the city where the Earth Summit 1992 was held? Option A says Rio de Janeiro and option B says Paris. Where did Earth Summit took place in 1992? Is it Rio de Janeiro or Paris? It is Rio de Janeiro. Okay, clear with that? And now I have already given explanation for sustainable development. So what is sustainable development? See here, it means to say that development should take place. How? Without damaging the environment. Without damaging the environment, and the development in the present should not compromise with the needs of the future generation. So the development should take place but not under the cost of environment, which means to say that we must not damage the environment. Okay, that such type of development is considered as sustainable development. Okay, clear? So like I told you that Agenda 21 is very important. So now what is this Agenda 21? See, this Agenda 21, it is actually, it is a non-binding, but it is a significant declaration. Right, like I told you, some 100 leaders, they joined together in a committee in that summit, Earth Summit, right. It is actually a part of UN conference on environment and development. It was a United Nations conference on environment and development. Over there, some 100 leaders, they gathered together and they spoke about that. They considered that an issue, that the environment degradation and all that. Right, and then they signed this Agenda 21. Like I told you, it is a non-binding but a significant declaration, right, which is it is that to combat the environmental damage, poverty as well as diseases through mutual needs, on mutual needs, common interests and shared responsibility as well. And one of the important feature of this Agenda 21 is that, see, the objective was that every local government, they should draw their own local Agenda 21. Okay, so understood, right? What is this Agenda 21? What did it focus on? What are its principles and all that? Clear with that? Okay. So now, see, Rio de Janeiro is located in which country? Is it Brazil or Spain? Is it option A or option B? It is option A, Brazil. Right? So now, I want you all to answer to these questions once the session is done. Right? Comment your answer. Right? Type your answers in the comment section. Okay? So the first question is, what is sustainable development? And the second question is, what was the need for organizing Earth Summit? Why did they organize Earth Summit? Okay? Fine. So now, I have got quiz for you all. We completed the sustainable development, right? So, on sustainable development, I have few questions for you all. Try to answer to these questions. The first question is, what will be the effect of indiscriminate use of resource? So, what happens when you use the resource without, planning properly? What happens? Option A says depletion of resource. Option B says global ecological crisis. Option C says accumulation of resource in few hands. And option D says all of the above. So, which one do you think is the right answer? Which one? Any guesses? Roshni says D. Yes, it is all of these, right? So, when you use resources without planning properly, obviously there will be depletion, and then global ecological crisis will also arise, and also the accumulation of resource, in only few of them can get, not everyone, like I told you. There will be division, right? Only rich will afford to buy, whereas see, when the availability of particular resource is very less, that time the cost of that resource, it increases, it shoots up. So that time what happens, only rich will be able to buy, whereas the poor people cannot afford to buy. That's what it says, the accumulation of resources in few hands. Okay, so next question, which of the following have to be managed for sustainable development? Option A says industry, option B says market, option C says resources, and option D says crop. So what has to be managed properly for sustainable development? Any guesses? What is the right answer? What is the right answer? Industry or market? What are we supposed to manage properly so that it will lead to sustainable development? For us to development, see, we need technologies, we need industries for manufacturing and all that, right, for which we will have to utilize the resource. So, Roshni says option C. Yes, option C is the right answer. Okay, so the next question, balancing the need to use resources and also conserve them for the future is called, option A says sustainable development, resource conservation, resource development, sustainable conservation. Which one do you think is the right answer? Is it sustainable development or sustainable conservation? See, the question says balancing the need to use the resource and also conserve them for future is called as, which one is the right answer? Roshni says option A, and option A is the right answer, sustainable development. I told you, the development is important. We want technology, we want industries for which we will have to use the resource, but then we will have to use that properly. We will have to utilize that properly so that it will be available. That resources should be made available to the future generation also. Like I told you, we have to develop but without damaging the environment. That is considered as sustainable development. Okay. So now what is Agenda 21 and list its two principles? So from this sustainable development, you might be asked questions like this, MCQ questions like this, and hardly you might get 2 mark or 3 mark, that too from this Agenda 21 and what was that committee all about. That too particularly they will ask about this Agenda 21 for 3 mark. What was that Agenda 21? Okay, like I told you, agenda, it is non-binding, it is non-binding in the sense it is not controlled by the government, but then it is significant one. Okay, I told you, some 100 leaders together, they gathered there in Brazil, right? That was Rio de Janeiro, a place where they gathered, and there was that conference, UN conference was going on over there. They declared this, they signed this Agenda 21, right? What was its two principle? What was its two principle? One was to combat the environmental degradation, and the second one is to fight against the diseases through global cooperation on common interests, mutual needs and shared responsibilities. Okay, so this question can be asked from that topic, the sustainable development topic, for 3 mark. Okay, clear with that? Fine. So now we have completed the development of resource part, and now we'll be moving on to resource planning and how is resource planning done in India. Okay, clear with that? Fine. So now what is resource planning? Like I told you, if we use resource randomly, then what it will cause harm to us only, right? Do you think if you randomly, if you just like that, if we use the resources for our own development, then what happens? After some time we will get degraded. So such type of development is not considered as sustainable development, right? So for the sustainable development to take place, resource planning is very, very important. Resource planning is very important, right? So now we'll talk about resource planning and how is it done in India. We'll see that as well. Okay, so like I told you, why resource planning is done? See, because some regions are rich in certain types of resources, like in our India only. You just look at, see, I told you, in case of Rajasthan, the solar energy is very high. In case of Gujarat, the wind energy is very high, right? Like this, the resources, it varies from place to place, right? So, but are deficient in other resources. Like I told you, in Rajasthan, it is rich in wind, even solar also. But what about water? Water resource is not that good, right? So like that, in certain region, certain resources will be less, and in certain region, certain resources will be more in amount. Therefore, to utilize them, we should first plan them accordingly, right? And some regions are self-sufficient in terms of the availability of resources. Like I told you, in some region it will be available, and then some regions have acute shortage of some vital resources. Because of these reasons, we will have to plan and utilize them accordingly, or else it will lead to what? Depletion, right? Resource depletion, division, again same global warming, pollution and all that. That can also be the reason. That's why the resource planning is important. Okay, and like I told you, in India, what? The resources, the availability of the resources, it varies from place to place, right? Now see the states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, they are rich in mineral and coal deposit, right? Whereas Arunachal Pradesh, water resource is very high, whereas they lack infrastructural development. And what about Rajasthan? Solar and wind energy is good, but then they lack water resource. And also in Rajasthan, see, they have good wind energy, but then windmills are very less, right? The technology also is not that developed in Rajasthan, right? And in case of Ladakh, it is rich in cultural heritage, but deficient in water and infrastructure. And so that's why, like I told you, in India, certain regions have got good resources. On the other hand, same regions will have some other resource which is in deficient. They are not equal throughout our country. That's why planning is needed, right? So now, which of the following region lacks the infrastructure? Is it Ladakh or Pune? Which one? Which place in India lacks infrastructure? Which of the following? Is it Ladakh or Pune? Is it Ladakh or Pune? It is Ladakh. Okay? Fine. So now I want you all to type answer to this question once the session is done in the comment section. Okay? Why some regions which have acute shortage of some vital resources? Why do you think in certain regions that certain resources it will be very less? Why is it like that? Can you think of this? See, because you might get questions like this for 2 marks. First, I want you all to think and answer to this question. Right, so comment in the comment section and I'll get back to you. Fine? Okay, so now I've got quiz for you all. See, which state is rich in water resources but lack in infrastructural development? Option A says Madhya Pradesh, option B says Arunachal Pradesh, option C says Maharashtra, and then option D says Gujarat. Which one is the right answer? Which state is rich in water resource but lacks infrastructure? But then lacks infrastructure. Which one? It is Arunachal Pradesh. So you must remember all these students. I showed you a slide, right, wherein in which part of the country where which resource is in abundant and which one is not that abundant. Okay? And next question, Ladakh is deficient in water, infrastructure and vital minerals but is rich in dash. Option A says solar energy, option B says coal deposits, option C says cultural heritage and option D says tidal energy. So Ladakh is rich in which of these? It is cultural heritage. Option C, cultural heritage. Okay. And then which of the following state is rich in minerals and coal deposit? Option A says Madhya Pradesh, option B says Jharkhand, option C says Chhattisgarh, option D says all of this. Which one is the right answer? Any guesses? It is all of these, right? Okay. So now in India, like I told you, some region it is rich in certain types of resources but deficient in some other type of resources, right? We saw that, yes, we agree with that, right? So you might get questions like this from this particular section. Okay, this can be asked for 5 mark also, right, or else 3 mark, right? So you will have to present your answer in such a way wherein you will have to mention, okay, which state. First you should say that yes, you agree with that, and then you will have to mention that the states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, they are rich in what? Mineral resources but they lack industries. And then second point, Arunachal Pradesh, again what is abundant in that particular region and what does it lack and all that. And then you should talk about other places in country. I showed you that slide now. You will have to write those points when this question is asked. You will have to write that which particular place, what does it have in more and what does it have in less. What does it lack and all that. Okay, clear with that? Fine, so we are done with that as well. So in today's session we have covered what is resource, what are all the classification of resources, right? And then we spoke about the development, sustainable development, right? And from that the conference is very important, that annual 21 is important. And then we spoke about resource planning and resource planning in India, right? So this is the summary of this particular session. You can download the notes of this session from the link that is given below in the description, and also you can join our Telegram. If you have not yet joined the Telegram channel, do join our Telegram channel Diksha Vedantu 9th and 10th, where you will get all the notes and mock tests, assignments, everyday updates and all that. Okay students, clear with that? Fine. So yeah, thank you all for attending this session, and if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, then do subscribe to our channel Diksha Vedantu class 9th and 10th English. Okay students, so all the best for your preparation, and yeah, this is it for today's session. In the next session we will be starting with land resources and soil resources, right? So thank you all. And